Consumers want to know the facts about the products they buy, but America's agricultural landscape is not easy to navigate. Between different companies, scientific advancement, government regulations, advertisement campaigns, and an unhealthy amount of myth and misconception, anyone would be hard-pressed to make sense of it. That's where Real Ag comes in. Kyle Bauer and the Real Ag crew bring you truthful, unbiased information about real agricultural concerns. From the producers who make your food, to the store where you buy the final product, and everything in between. This is Real Ag. Now, here's your host, Kyle Bauer.
The High Plains are not known for the grandeur of their forests, but maybe they should be. Forestry is our topic today on Real Ag.
Production of Real Ag is made possible by
Servitech has been helping producers across the Midwest make the planet more productive since 1975. We are proud sponsors of Real Ag, helping tell the story of how your food makes it to your plate.
The Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by farmers.
What is forestry?
When you think of forestry, I think it's important to realize that what we're talking about is the science of growing and caring for trees to fit the needs and the benefits of our society and our people, as well as all the other living things that depend upon that particular resource.
I think forestry concerns all the topics that are that touch trees. So there's a lot of tangential topics that come into play that trees affect, whether it's animal agriculture or row crop agriculture, or just the shade trees on the farmstead. I think that trees are an important part of forestry. Obviously, otherwise we wouldn't call it forestry. But they're not. It's not relating to topics that center only around trees. It's how trees affect all other things around us, I think.
It has to do with the natural woods that we have in our area and the wildlife within them, as well as what producers are growing right now and later will be products.
The farther west you go, the more our focus becomes on what we describe as agroforestry, the trees and shrubs that are mixed in with our modern agricultural systems that we're using today, and the most common of those is generally the shelter belts and the windbreaks we think about.
A windbreak is a row of trees along your crops or your cattle or your household, usually on the west and the north side to block those incoming winds.
Managing forests is both a science and a philosophy. You need to have some idea of where you'd like to end up, but you need to also have a way of quantifying that and gathering some data and making decisions driven by good numbers and good science on that.
We have tree farmers that grow different things, such as some of them use them as Christmas trees. And they, depending on the size of business they want, they plant accordingly. As well as for hardwoods and stuff that can be timbered. If they are planting them and say they want a windbreak, but they want to make some profit off of that, keep planting so that as it gets to a sellable height where you could cut it, you're growing another one in its place so it continues to be a usable windbreak for you. Forestry that doesn't involve harvesting the trees would consist of what we use just to attract wildlife, and as well as for a windbreak, and any sort of conservation use.
But equally important to our state is the natural timber that we have occurring in the state. Probably, according to U.S. Forest Service definition, about 2.4 million acres of our state is in forest land, with another 2.9 roughly in what I'm describing as agroforestry, the windbreaks, shelter belts, trees that follow our creeks and rivers. Forestry affects our daily lives in numerous ways. If you look around this office, you'll see all the wood paneling that we have up here. Forestry is, the products that we see, the water that we drink. All of those things are better because of the woodlands and the trees that we have.
What services do forestry departments provide?
Every state in the United States has a state forestry agency, and every state is mandated by some law within their statutes that guides that agency.
A lot of it is educating their counties about the diseases and, you know, even kind of how to prune trees and stuff.
Dave Bruton's with the forestry department here in the state of Kansas, and he writes most of my management plans. We've had several others over the years that help write management plans. On my particular property, I have a tree farm between here and Troy and another one between here and Atchison. There's about 40 acres in each parcel that's timbered, and we manage it under the direction of the forestry.
My job is to provide public service to the people of Kansas with a focus on our private landowners, and it's providing technical forestry expertise to the people of the state. So basically a professional forester that has the knowledge of how to grow and care for and manage the trees and windbreaks and shelter belts and woodlands that we have here in Kansas and the related natural resources. We provide that professional expertise to the people of this state.
The majority of it, I would say, has to do with windbreaks. What we sell to customers, that's the #1 use for our seedlings, would be windbreaks. And right after that would be wildlife purposes.
I think forestry management is a really all-encompassing philosophy. I think that with a light hand and some thoughtfulness, you can end up getting a forest where you'd like to have it be, and it can be healthy and in line with what nature would like to have happen there.
Conservation use consists of windbreaks, it does include timber, riparian plantings, which are along streams to prevent erosion, wildlife, and Christmas tree growing is included in what we sell. We only sell for conservation use.
Working with private landowners is the greatest benefit that we have in this job. But we continue to provide one-on-one assistance to the people of the state. A professional forester will go on site with a landowner, spend half a day, maybe a day with them sometimes, walking through their woodlands, examining their shelter belt, providing direct verbal information, helping them identify trees, helping them understand what their issues are. And that'll be followed up with documentation in a management plan and written information that summarizes the advice and the suggestions that might be given based upon what that landowner's interested in. My father was a forester here in Kansas prior to me, so I'm second generation, and working with private landowners is a way to vicariously enjoy a whole spectrum of landscapes and interests and values and characters and all the things that make working in Kansas as a forester so unique and interesting.
Many forestry agencies sell trees and seeds to consumers.
Producers interrelate with me and the conservation program. We work with them to sell them pecan and walnut and the woods that they can later use for timber. We'll sell about 15 different types of seedlings, as well as customers can call and tell us a species that they're looking for, and we'll see if we can track it down in other nurseries. So we try to provide to the customers' requests.
In the early spring is when the trees are lifted at the nursery down at Manhattan. They also bring trees in from other states, if specialty items, I think.
During our seasons, we have fall and spring seasons. Certain things are available then. In the fall, it's just containerized, and in the spring, we have a variety of seeds, bare roots, and container seedlings. And they can call or order online, and depending on how weather is doing, we try not to send them when it's freezing. Then we'll send them to them and they can plant them, and we recommend watering every 7 to 10 days.
That's when most of the tree planting is done, early spring. Before bud breaks, they lift them. Then they take and bundle them into groups of 25, 50, 100 plants. And you can buy those trees for pennies on the dollar. I mean, they're very cheap. They're not very big trees. The walnut will be probably a foot to a foot and a half tall. They'll have a root wad about like a grown carrot, and that has to be inserted into the ground and the roots spread out.
A district forester can always help create a layout. I can do so much over the phone of kind of figuring out what their area is and calculating how many and the spacing for it, as well as just talking with them about what needs they want. Are they wanting it to have some fruiting qualities? Are they wanting it eventually also as timber? Or is it for wildlife, and what plants will attract that?
How does forestry affect Kansas in particular?
The biggest thing people ask us is, are there forests in Kansas? And we want to reassure them that there are.
In regards to the services we provide through the Kansas Forest Service, we began back in 1887 in this state with when the Commissioner of Forestry was established by our state legislature. And back in 1909, then we became a part of Kansas State University and remained with them ever since. And that was when the first state forester was established in Kansas. And so all along, probably in '65 is when all the state statutes that our agency has that guides what we do, the mandates that we have as an agency to serve the people of the state came into effect. So we've had a long history of forestry here in the state. Even though we're a state that wouldn't be thought of in those terms, we were probably the 5th state forestry agency that was established in the nation. So we've got quite a history in Kansas regarding our understanding of the importance of woodlands and trees and shelter belts. In Kansas, we work through the Department of Horticulture, Forestry, and Recreational Resources at Kansas State University. We are somewhat unique compared to other state forestry agencies in that we are housed within a university. There are 5 others within the Great Plains area that also share that type of relationship, which is, in my opinion, a very, very beneficial relationship to be associated with Kansas State. And so in regards to the way that works with the other government entities in the state, it places us in a position to be able to work in harmony with some of these other natural resource agencies that I've mentioned. We share strategic planning together. We have a Kansas Forest Action Plan that guides and names the main issues that we have addressed here in Kansas based upon some fairly broad public input and colleague input on what those are. All those different groups and agencies come together to help us identify those strategies and deliver those strategies. Using the example of Natural Resource Conservation Service again, they're an agency that at least in this part of the world, doesn't really have the technical forestry expertise. And so through technical service provider agreements, we provide that to them. They in turn have financial assistance programs that they provide to the people of the state, and we're able to provide our expertise, our planning expertise, and our professional foresters to go on site to work with landowners, and then that fits quite nicely in with the financial aspect that's offered through the Natural Resource Conservation Service. So through that partnership, we're able to deliver and make a very positive change in the resources of the state addressing these issues within the Kansas Forest Action Plan, which, by the way, is very focused upon priority areas that we've identified geospatially based upon a variety of data inputs that guide us in our work.
Forestry in Kansas is, in my opinion, more of intentional forestry. We're not blessed with wide-ranging forests that are across the state, border to border. In the eastern third of the state, we have quite a large amount of native woodland and forest leading into the Flint Hills, where we have more gallery forests of bur oak and that. But in a large part of the state, our forests are working forests. Agroforestry is, I think, an incredibly important topic for the state, and has been for the last century or more, whether it's windbreaks and shelter belts to help reduce winds for cattle and for crops, or whether we're just talking about planting trees around the homestead, whether they're fruit trees or shade trees. I think forests in Kansas are a topic that probably affects all of us.
We're probably 4th or 5th in the production of walnut annually in the United States. The reason being, walnut is an edge crop. It doesn't grow in the deep forests. I worked in Kentucky, and if I walked all day in Kentucky and counted on one hand all the walnut trees I would see, whereas here probably 20% to 50% of your stands will be a walnut mix. And as elms dropped out of the picture in the past and ash is beginning to, walnut's going to make up more and more of our crop here.
A lot of it was planted originally as settlers were coming in to develop windbreaks and stuff, and through more plantings and natural reseeding, it's grown rather larger in the eastern part of Kansas.
So when we talk about the history of it here in this state, you know, it goes back even prior to European settlement, when native peoples used these forests following our creeks and rivers for protection and wintered in those areas, and used those trees for fuel. And indeed, you know, the first people that moved to this part of the world relied heavily upon the trees that we did have occurring naturally in this state for their very subsistence. So as we did settle our state and people moved into this area and our government's set up, we passed laws that encouraged the planting of trees throughout the Great Plains. Probably one of the earliest ones was 1862, the Homestead Act, which when people would arrive here in Kansas, they could plant 10 acres of trees and gain a certain amount of land associated with that. And laws similar to that kept coming into place, or acts came into place following that, Timber Claims Act, all for the purpose of trying to settle this part of the world. And eventually, as we ended up cultivating quite a bit of the state and learning how to do that well, back in the 30s, you know, we ran into the situation of the Dust Bowl and the extended drought, some of the weather that we've, you know, similarities we've experienced the last 3 years, frankly, in this state again, and saw the need for shelter belt planting throughout that time period. And that's when President Roosevelt instigated the Prairie Plains Forestry Project, which had this grandiose idea of establishing a 100-mile wide shelter belt from Canada all the way, tree planting all the way down to Texas. And much of the remnants we have these days with our shelter belts and windbreaks in Kansas are a result of that tree planting effort.
Forestry is important for the lumber industry as well.
Farmers can definitely make money with trees on their property. I think it's a pretty well destroyed myth that if you plant trees that it takes good land out of production, you end up paying for it in the long term.
The biggest thing about farming in Kansas is most people look at timbered areas as obstacles or wasteland. In most cases, I tell people in this particular part of the country, which is very steep, that if you can't get a rotary mower over it, you probably should have it in timber.
Farmers can make a substantial amount of money, and do, harvesting trees in Kansas, and it's one of the little known facts about our woodland resources in the state.
We buy basically any of the walnut that's 16 inches and larger at chest high. That's about what a average sized man can reach around and touch his finger, that size and larger. And then we take those logs, we bring them into the mill along with the top logs, which may be as small as 12 inches. Then we separate those logs into different groups. The best being the veneer, which is usually either shipped back to Indiana or sent overseas. The middle range material would be the gunstock material, which is basically a short tree usually that has divides into two main stems. And when you cut it off, it looks a little like a slingshot or like a Mickey Mouse ears or something. And those material has figured wood in it, which we process. That's probably the second grade. Then we get into the different lumber grades, which go for anything from flooring to trim to furniture material.
How does forestry affect wildlife?
Wildlife is an extremely important component for all of us for lots of different reasons. And of course, in Kansas, there's a certain set of species that really need forest and woodland habitat. You know, it's not as large as in some other states. You know, we're mainly, again, a grassland state, and so we have a lot of grassland species we're concerned about, you know, prairie chicken and quail and whatnot, but we also have species that rely upon our woodlands that are very important to us. You know, wasn't so long ago when the American eagle was in danger, and you know, if we didn't have the cottonwood trees along our rivers and streams, you know, that'd be a species that would be in terrible trouble. But trees provide a tremendous amount of wildlife habitat. The oaks and the acorns that come from our oak species are a very important component to a whole variety of mammals, let alone the songbirds and the neotropical migrants and the host of other species that are associated with our woodlands. So yeah, woodlands play an incredibly important role in offering wildlife habitat and a diversity in this landscape that we have here in Kansas.
What can we do to keep forests healthy?
I would say one of the biggest things that ordinary citizen like you and I could do to really encourage healthy forests is reduce the movement of firewood if at all possible. One of the ways that we've learned that invasive insects and diseases that can really harm our forests on a large scale. One of the ways that we know they move around very quickly is in the back of a pickup truck on a log, or someone goes camping and they bring their firewood with them, and they end up having a hitchhiker in that firewood, whether it's an insect or a fungus or something like that. Because these things do spread slowly on their own, but not quite as fast as 400 miles down the interstate in a day. So just using local firewood, cutting your own, burning it near where you want to, near where you harvested the firewood is one of the best ways to help stop the spread of things that can really threaten our forests, both urban and rural.
Emerald ash borer was brought into this country probably 10 to 15 years ago. It was brought in the northern United States. It's since spread. We've got an infestation in Parkville, Missouri, and several others just south of here. I'm not sure it hasn't affected some of our trees.
One of the ways in which we've really applied that is that we know from the world of ecology and biology, when you reduce the number of species and diversity that you have in a given ecosystem, it tends to very much destabilize it. So if we have a disease that comes in and takes out a certain part of our urban canopy or our forest, that reduces the number of species that are in there, it creates a more destabilized environment in which other changes can occur rapidly, where you can lose a lot of your overstory, or you can have an understory in your woodlands that goes from being a very diverse mix of shrubs and herbaceous plants down to just a monoculture, which then can lose its ability to actually help the rain percolate into the soil instead of running off. It can lose its ability to help the forest regenerate through leaf cover and litter. You can lose some of your wildlife. If you don't have some of your pollinators, then you don't get any seed and fruit set on some species of shrubs and trees. if you lose your squirrels in an environment, you would have a less of a regeneration of oaks and hickories and things like that tend to be spread around by squirrel activity and burying.
That wraps up this episode of Real Ag. Remember, you can see every episode of this series by going to SmokyHillsTV.org. Until next time, I'm Kyle Bauer, and this has been Real Ag.
Production of Real Ag is made possible by
Servitech has been helping producers across the Midwest make the planet more productive since 1975. We are proud sponsors of Real Ag, helping tell the story of how your food makes it to your plate.
The Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by farmers.